Were you shocked this week at the news from those interim findings of the review into the Queensland Forensic Lab? Cases dating back 5 years could now potentially be reopened. DNA samples hadn't met, because of the DNA sampling process. There was a different threshold that the Queensland Health Forensic and Science Services Lab had applied between June 2018 and June of this year. And the Commissioner, Walter Sofronow KC, found that over that period, scientists may have provided untrue or misleading information about the detection of DNA in some sworn witness statements relating to samples with very small amounts of DNA. Queensland's Health Minister, Yvette D'Arth, has since assigned a respected molecular biologist, Professor Frank Gannon, to oversee the implementation of the interim recommendations from the report, and the investigation into this will continue. It does raise questions, though. How much trust is there in the state's forensic testing processes? Why did it take so long for something to happen as a result of this? Dr. Terry Goldsworthy is an Associate Professor in Criminology at Bond University. Dr. Goldsworthy, were you surprised at the initial findings in this report?
Oh, look, I guess disappointed more than surprised, Kate. I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think about forensics, suffer from what we call the CSI effect, where you think forensics is always right, that you can always get forensics at every crime scene, etc. And what we know is that there are many issues that have risen around crime labs overseas, etc. We've had examples here in Victoria where a fellow was imprisoned for rape due to a muck-up in the forensic lab. So I didn't think it would be as big or as widespread as it is, but I'm not surprised. I mean, forensic science, the application of it is quite fallible.
Okay, so just so that we understand, this is not an issue about the findings themselves or the testing of the data being inaccurate. It's all about the thresholds that were being applied and then what statements were made off the back of those. Can you explain?
Yeah, so essentially an administrative decision was made. They had two options, and what I call an option paper, looking at how they would deal with certain samples, priority 2 samples for major crimes. And they decided that if it didn't meet a certain threshold, a quite high threshold compared to some other states, that they would report that the sample was submitted for DNA analysis. However, the amount of DNA detected at that stage was insufficient for further processing. And that statement is the one that is problematic, because the inquiry, the Commissioner has found that in fact those samples may contain sufficient DNA to obtain a partial DNA profile, or they may contain sufficient DNA to obtain a full DNA profile. Hence, we have the issues that's risen now, where we've had, as you said, 5 years worth of cases that are going to have to be examined to see if they should have been processed further.
Yeah, so it's the statements that's the problem. The statement isn't exactly accurate because there may have been the possibility of finding something if they were tested further. So what do you want to know at this point, Terry Goldsworthy? Because the investigation does continue. What are your unanswered questions?
Well, my concerns are, we're talking here about miscarriages of justice, essentially, I think. So miscarriage of justice, in broad terms, is a less than optimal outcome in the criminal justice system. And generally we think of innocent people going to jail as the typical miscarriage. In this case, I think we're much more likely to be talking about cases, what we call negative cases, where someone who is culpable escapes sanction and has not been brought to justice due to the fact that these matters weren't tested. So I'd be interested to see just exactly how many cases we're talking about, and getting a breakdown onto how many are the negative cases where someone who was a suspect was never tested, and are there any in there where DNA that may have exonerated someone haven't been tested. I read the report and I see the Commissioner said, yes, well, those ones where someone innocent may be in jail could be there, but they'd be in the minority, the very, very small minority. So he's obviously talking here about people who may have committed an offence who haven't been brought to trial for it.
Right, okay. And of course, as I said, it continues. I was speaking earlier this week to criminal lawyer Bill Potts about this, and I asked him if he knew that the threshold in Queensland was different to New South Wales, and he said yes, he did. So that threshold element was not a surprise. Were you aware of that too?
No, I wasn't aware of that. I mean, I don't get into that detail of forensics examination. I mean, the police were aware of it. I mean, so I guess we should just flag that the QPS agreed to this protocol being put in place. Now, they have scientific officers who I'd imagine would have a good knowledge of how these things work. So, I mean, I guess that'll be an aspect that will need to be looked at by the police themselves as to why they agreed to it, when there's obviously going to be implications. But, you know, it is, I guess, concerning that it really took a lot of media pressure to get this inquiry to happen. Is one thing that, you know, I kind of question, why was that media pressure necessary? I mean, these kind of things are crucial to the criminal justice system, which operates on a basis of legitimacy. So once people think that there's issues around the criminal justice system actually functioning properly, then that basis of legitimacy is threatened, and that's problematic.
The other thing that criminal lawyer Bill Potts said was that there are broader problems. His view, his concern was not just with this threshold issue and the statements that arose from it, which have been found to be problematic. His concern is about not enough resources being put into the lab over a longer period of time, like a decade or more, and concerns about the delays that happen when samples need to be processed. And not just talking about a month or two, but sometimes 9 months before you're likely to know what the results are from sampling at a crime scene. So his view with that was that kind of delay, that, you know, the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied, he was worried about the implications with bail, maybe someone more likely to get bail because there's that part of the evidence wasn't, you know, going to be available for 9 months, and other kind of implications too. Do you agree that there should be a broader look at the way that Queensland's forensic lab works beyond just this idea of the accuracy of statements to the court?
Oh, yes, I think there should be a whole review of the entire organisation. I'd agree fully there with Bill that it's probably more widespread issues impacting. And if you read the report of the Commissioner, he talks about this, basically the argument put forward to take the second option being a resourcing one that will free staff up. You know, I can remember when I was in the police, there was always this tension of getting things examined versus a lack of resources. So I think they've been under-resourced for some time now. Whenever we used to go up there after major jobs to prioritise what evidence gets sampled, there was always issues about, you know, staff in terms of being able to resource. So that's clearly something the Health Minister is going to have to look at, the government will have to look at. I mean, if you want a first-rate justice system, you've got to fund a first-rate justice system.
And are you confident, given the interim results here, that that's what we're going to get out of this inquiry?
Look, I don't know if that's in the ambit of the inquiry. I think the Commissioner will probably recommend something along those lines if he thinks that's a causative reason for this happening. And certainly, I think the final report will probably have a bit more information in there for us as to wider issues, whereas this interim report, I think, was quite narrow in terms of the statements being problematic. So I'd like to think that there will be some recommendations there for wider-ranging reforms to how the health, forensic and scientific services operate, this testing regime and how they resource it and what they're going to do to ensure, you know, quality assurance, which is a framework that's vitally important to forensic work.
And in the meantime, of course, we'll see what happens with this public inquiry when it starts next week. Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Thanks, Kate.
Dr. Terry Goldsworthy is an Associate Professor in Criminology at Bond University. Queensland Police have established a dedicated task force to coordinate a review into a significant number of investigations involving DNA evidence that was tested by Queensland Health Forensic and Scientific Services. They say that as cases are examined, police will contact affected parties, including victims, to provide updates and as much information as possible. Or you could make general inquiries about a matter that impacts you, if you'd like, through the Police Link online portal. Or there's a dedicated hotline that's been set up as well. It's 1300 993 191. That's 1300 993 191.
abc.net.au/connect.